Hey friends, welcome. It's Skin here. Pretty going a little stir crazy here. If you watch this video at some point in the future, you can look at the timestamp. This is the end of March 2020, and we're smack in the middle of this whole coronavirus stuff that's going on. So we're all kind of hunkered down. I thought I'd make a video today and just kind of talk through the instrument process for me personally, just kind of what I went through, preparing for the written exam piece of that, and then of course the instrument training, and in this case specifically the accelerated training. And so I chose a place called IFR 6 in Charleston, South Carolina. I'll kind of talk through that process here in a little bit. But if you have any questions, I try to do a pretty good job at answering YouTube questions and things like that, people that have comments and stuff. If you have any questions, feel free to ask any. Happy to answer in any way that I possibly can. But anyway, so the picture that you see on the screen here, and I'll just kind of walk through some pictures and a couple websites and stuff and just sort of talk stream of consciousness a little bit. I literally have nothing prepared. I don't have a piece of paper with an agenda or anything in front of me. I'm just kind of talk out loud. But this is, I passed my instrument check ride just a few days ago. Today's a Sunday. I passed my check ride the previous Wednesday, so 4 or 5 days ago. And this is in at Summerville Airport in Summerville, South Carolina. And this is me and my examiner named Don Hay in this Cherokee that is 5256 Lima, which was a Cherokee that was a lease back to the Charleston Flight School, IFR 6, which was the school that I went to. And again, I'll kind of go into more detail with regards to how I chose the school and just kind of the whole process and procedure. I've got a couple, websites up, and then I've got some pictures of stuff while I was attending the class and some of the materials and things like that. So obviously, if you want to know what's going on with school, I'll put a link to IFR 6 in the comments if you want to go check them out, or if you want to go talk to Mike McCurdy, who runs the place over there. You obviously would probably want to call them for the latest, greatest information and stuff that's going on there. But, that's really, what we'll talk about from that perspective. All right. So sorry, I had to clear my throat there. So let's talk a little bit about the instrument written test preparation. After just kind of doing some pretty basic searching around, it seemed to be pretty apparent, pretty obvious that these folks called Shepherd Air was the place to go. It is not a incredibly expensive tool, especially seeing that if you so this IRA right here, it's $45 for the software, and it is at least as of this day. I know just a couple months ago the FAA announced they were going to be making some changes to the process and everything, and I'm assuming at some point they're going to start changing questions on the exam. But as of today, certainly as of the end of January when I took the exam, Shepherd Air was spot on. There wasn't really even one question that I saw that I hadn't seen in any of my preparation, and I made a 98. I missed one question on the test, and I knew when I finished it. I actually thought when I finished it I'd made 100%. I thought I'd guessed right. There was one question. It was actually one of those questions where you're kind of looking at an HSI or a CDI kind of a thing. And it's like one of those, where are you on the map? The airplane is in some quadrant, and then it wants you to know where you're pointing and where you are in relation to the VOR kind of a thing. And I thought I got it right, but I missed that one. So I got a 98%. And in my case personally, I think it kind of did help on my check ride. I was kind of surprised that a lot of people, when I went to IFR 6 and showed, I obviously had to have my written test done to go sign up for an accelerated program. And the Mike, who was there, said that it's pretty rare for people to score that high on the test. Usually he sees kind of low mid 80s and things like that. So I don't know, maybe it did help for me with my oral part of my check ride. It wasn't super crazy. We talked through some scenario based stuff, but it wasn't. I didn't get lit up in my. I guess it would depend really on the examiner more than anything else. But anyway, I can't recommend this software enough. I think it only works on PC and iPad. And for me personally, I would highly recommend getting it on the PC. You can only install it one time. You can't. It's not like the Dauntless software is an example where you can install it on multiple different computers or devices. So you better decide which computer you're going to install it on. Install it on that computer. I found for me, just having it on my computer was easier because there's the screen with the test, and then there will be sort of another kind of a pop-up screen that will show any charts or anything like that, sort of any of the diagrams or exhibits or whatever. And then there's also another screen that can pop up that shows the explanation for the question, right? The answer and then the explanation. So you really could have 3 different screens up at the same time on the test software. And if you're trying to do that on an iPad, I think at least, and certainly from some feedback that I've heard from other people, it would be a little sort of problematic or difficult to do that. So I chose to just put it on a computer, my work computer that I travel around with a lot, and it worked great. And so I probably spent, 3 months or so really preparing, really hardcore for about the last, month or so, last couple weeks, really. I spent, some time every single day for the last 2 weeks. And then if you just follow their guidance, when you download the software, they have a whole process that they say to go through, right? There's a bunch of sections. You go through the questions, show the correct answer, and you just kind of work through all the questions. And basically, if you just follow their process, you'll do well on test. You'll at least pass the test for sure. And more likely than not, you'll score extremely well. So really, these guys have, and they kind of have a bounty too. So if you do see a question on the test that you've never seen before, you can call into them, and you can actually use them for your kind of a sort of a ground, like a CFI thing. I think they actually have some CFIs on staff. And so if you have some questions about, some of the questions themselves, you can actually call in and talk to a CFI if you want to. I didn't use that. And then, of course, you can get an endorsement as well. So at the end of the whole process, when you're ready, you can get an endorsement for the exam, and then, you can take that in as well, too. I also, in conjunction with this, did the Sporties kind of video training thing. And you could also kind of test out through that and get an endorsement. So I actually used the Sporties iPad, IFR training thing, and that's what I used to get my endorsement. Then I went in to go take the exam. But anyway, I can't recommend this software highly enough if you want to go past the test. Some of it's just rote memorization. Some of it, as you're working through it, you'll want to know the answer to it. You'll look at, an approach chart, and you'll see a symbol, or you'll see something that doesn't make any sense to you when you first start going through it. And your natural inclination should be, I don't just want to memorize, the answer to that. I want to go kind of figure out what's going on. And that's where something like Sporties can fill in some of the blanks, looking at YouTube and things like that, videos and stuff like that. Some of it, like some of the weather stuff and some other kind of crazy stuff, was just rote memorization stuff. You just would memorize certain things just because it was easier to memorize it than it was the stuff you're never, like, different kinds of fog, things like that, and, you just don't, you're never, nobody's ever going to ask you that ever again in your life. So, anyway, can't recommend this highly enough. Now for me, I started going through this process I started doing the instrument training stuff here locally. I was working with 3 different instructors, at this particular time in history. There's a lot of folks that are getting pilot training. And so there was a lot of pressure, for time and availability with all of the 3 CFIs that I was working with, and it was just getting really difficult to get anything predictable going on. And so I started thinking about, okay, maybe I'll just do this accelerated thing. And so I looked at a number of different places. I ended up settling on these guys called IFR 6, primarily because, there's a number of different reasons. It was out of my home area, and I thought that would be kind of cool to do all this training in a place that was completely new to me, new airports, kind of a whole new environment. it's, basically plan on 7 days of being gone, but it's 6 days of training. So it's pretty immersive. You're in a hotel room, you come home, you're, doing some homework, kind of preparing and stuff for the next day. And it's not just, flying to the same, airports and stuff that you're normally used to flying. So I thought that part was kind of cool. Unfortunately, Charleston is a fantastic, very cool town. Unfortunately, with all this coronavirus stuff going on, everything was shut down while I was there. So didn't really get to do anything, just kind of hunkered in my hotel room. And then, the other part was these guys actually have a couple of those full motion simulators. And so let me get my screen open here. So I'll open this guy here. So this is, a couple shots. I'll just kind of walk through some pictures. I just kind of downloaded all the pictures that I had on my phone. I'll just kind of step through them. But this is their office, and so they they obviously have a place at the airport, real small place over there, and they have an office that's just a couple minute drive from the airport. They've got a couple simulators. You can see the one on the left is not one of the full motion simulators. The one on the right is. I think they kind of use the one on the right, the full motion, more for private students actually, to kind of acclimate them to moving the airplane around on the ground and just kind of some of the basic things that you learn as a private pilot. And then by the time you go get to the airplane, some of this stuff is familiar to you, checklists and things like that. Most of the stuff that I did in the airplane, or in the sim anyway, was in the one on the left. And the airplane that I was flying was this Cherokee, so you can see they kind of have it set up for steam gauges. The airplane that I flew, the actual Cherokee that I flew, had a 530 in it, Garmin 530. They had a 530 and a 430 in the sim, so we were able to, kind of translate, the actual, using the avionics and stuff in the sim. And so that was kind of a big deal for me too. Just, the ability to, I don't remember exactly how many hours it is, 10 maybe, I think, of sim hours that you can do, that you can put into your, maybe it might be 20 even, I'm not really for sure, but I can't remember. 10 or 20 that you can use, that you can actually put in your logbook, and it goes towards your training. And so that was kind of nice too. It's less expensive to do it that way. I found for me, it's actually more difficult to fly the simulator than it is to fly the actual airplane. So if you can get the simulator to do what you want it to do, then you most definitely can get it to work in the airplane. But overall, the simulator was a great experience, and I'll show you some other stuff that's related to that. But anyway, that was kind of my decision process in terms of picking a school. And also the other thing too, these guys work really closely with the DPEs, with the examiners that they send their students to. So they can really, my instructor pretty much could tell me, for the most part, I mean, most of these guys are kind of creatures of habit. They do a lot of check rides. Could tell me, hey, this is usually what this guy does. This is usually, obviously with the students, they kind of debrief after a check ride. So they kind of know what's going on. I got a few curveballs. Again, my instructor's like, this is, probably what'll happen, but you never know what'll happen. And so because of weather, the day that I did my check ride, we did some things that I don't think he'd ever done with any of the other students that or candidates that my instructor had sent to the check ride. So I'll talk about that in a little bit as well. But anyway, that was kind of my experience and kind of the thought process for me in terms of getting this stuff done. I think in general, in terms of like cost and pricing and things like that, I think when you do any of these accelerated courses, from at least from my experience doing the research, you can probably expect to spend total all in probably somewhere between $9,000 and $10,000. You can look. I don't want to. You can look on their webpage and see what it costs. I don't know if the cost might change or whatever from time to time. So, or as we move into the future, the cost might go up or it may go down. But if you calculate the cost of the initial cost anyway, that covered all the training, that covered the cost of the check ride, that covered the materials that I received, and I basically had a CFII dedicated to me for 8 hours a day for 6 days. And if you fly your own airplane in, which was what my intention was initially, was to fly my own airplane in, fly the Mooney in, and do all the training in that. It didn't work out because a couple weeks prior to leaving for the training, the attitude indicator in the airplane started acting up, and then we took it to the avionics shop, and it was dying basically. So we, instead of throwing good money after bad and just replacing it with a rebuilt model, we just decided to do an avionics upgrade in the process, which is still in the process. The airplane should be done hopefully in a week or so. And we'll have some really cool stuff, and the vacuum system will be gone from the airplane. It'll be great, but I had to use one of their airplanes. And so that, from talking to my instructor, that's probably usually between, $2,000 and $3,000, depending on how many hours that you need to fly, right? Their recommendation, I think pretty much any accelerated school's recommendation, is that you come in with at least 10 hours of IFR time, ideally some hood time. And what I would really recommend is if you're bringing your own airplane, you really know what the avionics are, really know the best that you can. Obviously you'll learn a bunch of new tips and tricks, but have an understanding or have at least done some training with some CFIs where you know how to do a flight plan, where you know how to load an approach, where you know kind of what this whole activate vectors to final means and when that comes into play. When to use the OBS button, or what my instructor and other instructors I've heard call the $500 button, right? Because if you're doing an ILS approach and you go missed over to, or excuse me, if you're just doing an ILS approach and you don't press that OBS button, or you don't press the CDI button, sorry, to switch from GPS to VLOC, you're going to fail the check ride. You're not going to be doing the right things, and your instrumentation is not going to be showing you the right information because you haven't done that. So just be kind of aware of that. Go watch some Garmin videos or something to get a better idea of kind of what's going on in the airplane. The more information you can have from that perspective coming in, the better off you'll be. But anyway, so from that point on, once I got there, let's see here. I was kind of go through some of the other pictures here. Here's another kind of the screenshot of the inside of the simulator. This is just, they use Redbird simulators. I showed up on a Wednesday. I flew in on a Wednesday, got there on Wednesday afternoon, just kind of hung out for the day. My intent, obviously, when I booked the flight, was to be able to check Charleston out, go kind of downtown, see the sights. And of course, with all the stuff going on, nothing was open. So I just kind of hunkered down in the hotel room, found some places that I could go walk around to go get food and things like that. I showed up on Thursday morning at 9 o'clock and we kind of got started. I was shown the materials. So the book on the right-hand side is a study guide that they sent to me prior when I put my deposit down. So probably I had this for a couple months at least. And there are, let's see if I can see so this is the tabs for, what I was sent in advance. So there's just some intro stuff about the school. There's some planning stuff. There's some, this acronym that we used in the airplane called RIMTIM, for weather and, radios and instrumentation, and looking at what the missed approach stuff was and everything else. So there's some really good information in here, resources and just different exercises and stuff to do prior. And then the book on the left was the book that I received once we showed up. And this was kind of the guide for everything that we did through the training. And if I look at show the binder for this book, there's different course checklists, there's intro work, there's just familiarization stuff, getting, what's going to happen in the program. And you can see it's all broken down by days. So day one, we did familiarization. Day 2, we did VOR. Day 3, we did GPS approaches. Day 4, we did ILS. Day 5, we reviewed. There's some examiner tips in there. Day 6 was the check ride, etc. And so, one of the first things that we looked at, let's see, can I zoom into this a little bit? A little bit here. Let's see. So this is what, you needed to come into the course. So we literally, the first thing we did when we sat down was Mike and my instructor were there. We opened to this page. We just basically checked everything off to make sure that we had everything. So completed written test. I had that 98%. You need 40 hours of PIC cross country time. I had over 400 hours of that. The logbooks and things like that. If you're flying your own airplane, you need to make sure you bring all that stuff in. I was flying one of theirs, so that was check. You need your current flight review. You need your current medical. You need a passport. You only need to show your ID, your driver's license when you go to the check ride. But because this is a training school, you do need to bring your passport with you or birth certificate. Having 10 hours of instruction already. If you brought your own plane, GPS data. And then if you're flying your own plane too, they wanted you to have about 50 hours in your airplane just from a proficiency perspective. And then this was kind of a tool that we used every day, just kind of going through hours and things like that. So the start time, what I had. So I literally got there with 11.8 IFR hours with my CFII in the airplane. And this would count too if you had like a safety pilot and you went up and just were under the hood and things like that. Excuse me, those hours would count. And then you can see from a daily perspective what we did in the airplane and then just what the totals were. So by the time I went to go to my check ride, I had 42.9 total hours. Now this is from the book that I had. This was the thing that I would use to warm up every day in the simulator. So you'd start, right here in this area, and you'd kind of start in the simulator at 3,000 feet, normal cruise, and then you'd make these turns, climbing and descending turns, and timing everything, etc. And so this was, the exercise that we did every day just to kind of get warmed up in the airplane. And then once we did that, we'd move on to shooting approaches and things like that at different airports. I flew a ton in the airplane. I mean, I had 20 something hours in the airplane, and we went to a bunch of different airports. We did, well over 30 something different approaches into 7 different airports. We just did a lot of different flying. And I actually had, for the better part of 3 days, IMC conditions. So we'd literally take off from Charleston Airport, and 500-600 feet, 700 feet, depending on the day, we were in IMC. And so we were shooting these approaches. I didn't even have to put foggles on. This stuff went up to 12,000-15,000 feet. So we never got out of it. So for a full 2 days and then a half of another day of flying, it was almost all entirely in actual conditions. And so these are just some pictures. I just, for grins, these are just some pictures that, I can walk through here and show you guys of stuff that we did, stuff that I went through. This is the Carolina coast, the South Carolina coast. Some really beautiful pictures. We did some pattern work and stuff over this area. This area right down here is downtown. This is kind of looking back to the northwest, but this is the downtown Charleston coast, the big bridge. Charleston Airport's back kind of up over in the corner right here. So we're just literally right down on the coast. Just some more pictures. Again, this is the downtown area, the bridge, and then the airport's back up over here. Fort Sumter, kind of a cool picture there. Some more pictures. This is the Yorktown. Fort Sumter's back over here. This is that bridge that you keep seeing in some of the pictures. Some golf courses and some things like that. Another great picture. This is me doing homework one night in the hotel room. There's my instructor, Will, over here. And us getting gas at one of the airports in the Charlotte area. Some more cool pictures. This is a picture over Kiwa Island. This is the ocean course. We were flying up and down the coast one day and took my hood off. Looked at some pictures. Here's some friends that we had on the ramp with us one day. It's pretty cool. More pictures there. Here's another picture of the IFR 6 office. Both the simulators. It's kind of cool. You can see this little thing right here. They can just pull this panel off and move from a G1000 pretty quickly to to steam gauges. So I had a chance to play around a little bit with some of the G1000 stuff. Some pictures in the airplane. Here we're in the Cherokee. Obviously, at some point, we're about to do an RNAV approach into an airport called Low Country Regional. And so you can see kind of the conditions outside. This was mostly what we were flying, and we're a little bit kind of on top of this layer right now, but, still pretty IMC-ish. And this was at Charleston Airport. This was us before we left. I think it was maybe the day before the check ride, maybe Monday or Tuesday for sure. But this is what it was like. We'd, get out, and it's probably 500-600 foot, real kind of swampy outside. But it was great because it was real smooth stuff to fly in. Another example of just kind of getting on top of this stuff on one of the days and flying. This is me with my instructor, Will. This is the desk that I was at in my examiner's office, just kind of getting my stuff together before the oral. And then again, the check ride picture. Here's my certificate. This is kind of crazy. This was my flight home. This is my Southwest Airlines flight home from Charleston. There was 5 people on the airplane, so I'm probably in, row like 7 or 8 or something like that. I think there was 1 person, 2 people sitting in front of me, and then a couple people sitting behind me. So that was pretty weird. And then this is landing at Midway. So that flight from Charleston went to Midway, and it just was creepy how you can look. It was probably, 10 o'clock in the morning, 11 o'clock in the morning or something like that when we landed. And this is downtown Chicago, and there's just like no cars anywhere. So those are all the other pictures there. Again, not going super crazy here and going into a ton of detail. Certainly if you have any questions, let me know. But I just hadn't seen any videos that anybody put up about an accelerated course and just kind of what somebody's opinion of it was, and how for me personally, it was fantastic. I learn well in that situation where I can just be completely focused on it. I think if you know that it's going to take you a long time and you're only going to be able to get a lesson in maybe, once every week, maybe certainly once every 2 weeks, you're going to save a lot of money. It's going to save you a lot of headache too by going to the accelerated course, going through that. You're just going to get it knocked out in a week. I definitely went into the check ride. I flew great. In fact, I had my examiner even ask me on one of the GPS approaches that we were doing. There was an autopilot in the airplane, but my instructor and I kind of played around with it, and we realized that it didn't really work all that great. It would hold heading mode. It wouldn't really do nav mode, or wouldn't really, if you put it into an approach mode when you were on a final approach course, it really kind of wouldn't work right. So we just sort of said it was an in-op thing. I didn't say anything about that to my examiner, but we're almost to like the missed approach point. And I literally just it's an LPV approach, and I've got the needle. They're just locked in the whole way down. And he asked me, probably about 15 seconds before we got to the missed approach point, if I had the autopilot on, if I was using the autopilot. So in terms of proficiency and how well I felt about looking at the approaches, reading the charts, flying, I did, 8 hours almost of actual instrument time, IMC time, that I logged while I was at school. So I felt really good about the flying. And for me personally, if I'm trying to fly here at my house, it's a half a day. It's a minimum of a 4-hour kind of a deal for me to go do a 2-hour lesson, or hour and a half lesson, because it's 30 minutes to get there, 30 minutes to get home, putting gas in the airplane, getting it back in the hangar, pre-flighting, the whole thing. It's like a 4-hour ordeal to do that. And so to just not have to mess with all that stuff, to just be able to show up at this class, get some sim time in, get your mind right, go to the airplane, go fly, go do some debriefing with your instructor, talk about, some of the ground stuff, do, all those kinds of things, go home, kind of get ready for the next day. It's a really good experience. If you can make the time to do it, it's basically kind of taking a whole week off. Again, it's, got to plan for about 6 or 7 days at least. Some of the courses are 10 days or more for the accelerated. For me personally, at the end of the first day, I was kind of like, how the hell am I going to do this? How am I going to finish this? But by the third day or so, it just was all clicking. It was all clicking for me. And it was all starting to make sense, and I just felt really good with it. So I hope this was useful. Again, just trying to kill a little bit of time here, bored to tears, and I hadn't really seen anybody put a video up like this on YouTube, and so hopefully you find it useful, particularly if you're studying for the written test or trying to think about going through one of these accelerated courses. But thanks for watching. Again, if you have any questions or comments, please feel free to ask those questions in the comment section, and I promise you I'll answer those questions in short order. So thanks again. Hope everybody stays safe in all this craziness that we're going through, and best of luck to you in your instrument training. Thanks.